When Father Cyril was designated to be responsible for this assembly, he came to me with Father Tom Loya and asked to have it at St. Mary's in Whiting, and I said no twice. And I'm so glad that I said yes the third time. I knew what quite an undertaking it would be in, but at the end of the day, I'm spending my 25th year as a Christian, and I'm spending my 25th year as a Byzantine Catholic, and it's because of the Byzantine Catholic Church in Cleveland, Ohio, willed from all eternity that I'd be taking care of you with my wife here at this assembly. So we're going to talk to you a little bit. The theme of this entire assembly is "Come, let us worship and bow before Christ." And I want to talk to you a little bit today with Laura and Gianfranco about how diving in to the tradition of worship that is embodied instantiated in the Byzantine Catholic Church of St. Mary's in Whiting, diving into that tradition has led to the revitalization of our community interiorly and has provided all sorts of evangelical possibilities that's given life beyond this walls exteriorly. In order to begin, I want to start with a quote from 1924. The papal delegate to the United States at that time wrote a letter of complaint to the Holy See about our Ruthenian church. And he says the following. His name is Fumasoni Biondi. In contrast to the vigorous religious life of the Latin Church, this contrasts with the almost complete unproductivity of the Eastern Catholic element. No schools, no institutions. These kids of the second generation just do not have the same fascination that their parents did. Now, this wouldn't be the first time that the Vatican will complain about us. And it certainly wouldn't be the first time that the Vatican was absolutely wrong about us. But in fact, he's half right. He's half right. There was a tremendous amount of infighting in our church at its origins. We multiplied by division, tried as we may, our early bishops, when they were finally sent here to keep our church together, all it ever wanted to do was fall apart. But he's half right for two reasons that I can identify today. Number one, this letter was written in 1924, a letter of complaint, and in God's providence, at the same moment, the Ruthenian Church in the United States received its first convent of Basilian nuns. Mother Macrina went to Holy Ghost Convent in Tremont neighborhood, and from there spawned the Sisters of St. Basil the Great, and did what seemingly, according to Fumasoni Biondi, was impossible. The Greek Catholic Church started institutions and started schools. The fruits of those schools were unity. Wherever we had Basilians, there was not an Orthodox split. In fact, the pilgrimage to Mount St. Macrina was spawned by a gift of the Holy Father to bring Our Lady of Perpetual Help here to stir the embers of unity within the disparate members of the Byzantine Catholic Church in the United States, and in charge the institution of the Sisters of St. Basil the Great to do so. Their institutions provided evangelical import. I'm a product of a Basilian school, and the reason I can stand before you today, as I said, is because of that institution that God sent just at the time when the Pope's representative was complaining about our complete inability to do so. He's only half right, though, because long before he's complaining in 1924, there are parishes much like St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church. We have baptisms on record from 1895. We have records of Greek Catholics already here in 1884, when the first Greek Catholic priest sent to the United States to minister, Father Ivan Molansky, went to Shenandoah, Pennsylvania, immediately made contact with Whiting, Indiana. That's how far back this place goes. And so, a couple steps forward, baptisms happen. A couple steps forward, a GCU lodge is formed, and a couple steps later, a parish is formed. Now, when we consider parish, I want to give you a quote from our late Holy Father, Pope Francis, in his second encyclical, but really the first written by him, because he simply put his name to Lumen Fide, but Evangelii Gaudium. He talks about the parish like this. The parish is not an outdated institution, precisely because it possesses great flexibility. It can assume quite different contours, depending on the openness and missionary creativity of the pastor and the community. While certainly it's not the only institution that evangelizes, if the parish proves capable of self-renewal and constant adaptability, it continues to be the church living in the midst of the homes of her sons and daughters. This presumes that it is really in contact with homes and the lives of its people, and does not become a useless structure out of touch with people or a self-absorbed group made up of a chosen few. The parish is an absolutely adaptable institution, but it depends on the people that make it up and their willingness to make it a part of their home. I know in St. Mary's instance, it was a part of our home. In fact, the first building of this church was the first mortgage that so many of our families took on. They were living in row homes, renting them, but they mortgaged and put themselves up for collateral because God needed a home so that they could live here as well. What kind of institution is St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church in 126 years? Here, Biondi doesn't have the privilege to speak back, so I can correct his vision of our church. Our St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church was the mother church and a missionary church. It's the mother church of all of the Eastern Catholic churches in the Midwest. We have now two close churches nearby, St. Basil's in East Chicago, Holy Trinity in Indiana Harbor. I have records where St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church would hold regular collections just to support the missionary activity of founding churches to the south of here, so that other people could have the same Byzantine Catholic experience, right? When they moved into the city of Chicago, we have in the city of Chicago a historic neighborhood known as Ukrainian Village. It is Ukrainian Village because at the heart of Ukrainian Village is St. Nicholas Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral, right in the middle of it. That was a Carpatho-Rusin foundation, and they were tired of driving down dirt roads, coming to here for baptisms, and they wanted a church of their own. And when the split happened and our church went Ukrainian and Ruthenian in 1924, they got this church, which, you know, I was just telling earlier, I had to put all new roofs on this place in my whole 8 years, and we had the same contractor. Boy, am I glad I didn't have their roofs. So, not only did we expand into the city of Chicago, but our first priest, Father Nicholas Saragelli, who performed the first baptisms here, was a circuit rider missionary priest. He went all the way to Denver, Colorado, and what is now the Holy Transfiguration Orthodox Church in Denver is a foundation out of St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church. He died at 38, probably of exhaustion, because he would go from here and there, writing in metrics, Father Nicholas Saragelli, missionary priest, and made this his home base. Okay. What kind of institution is St. Mary's? It's a missionary institution, and it's full of even scholars and saints, right? If you look above you, this church has built a lot in its 126-year history. We've had 2 churches, 4 renovations, 2 halls, a school, a convent, 2 rectories, an orphanage, and we're now on our 2nd Marian shrine. Why not a 3rd? The principal architect of the church that you're sitting in is one of our former pastors, Father Michael Korba. He built this church and laid its cornerstone in 1917, and he was an architect. If you look at our churches built during this period, they would be borrowing a Catholic architect who would know how to build a basilica. They'd be borrowing a Protestant architect who would know how to build an A-frame meeting house. But Father Korba knew the architectural history that is integral to the Byzantine tradition and knew that the most important member of the choir was the church building. And so he set out to build Hagia Sophia on Lake Michigan, which is why you have these pendentive supports and this large dome. The model church, the largest church for almost 1,000 years, was a Byzantine church. Inspirational such it was that it was even the original model of St. Peter's Basilica, where some of you were on pilgrimage with our bishops this past spring. To sing in Hagia Sophia will give you an 11-second echo, embodying the bodiless spirits that we claim to represent as icons in the cherubic hymn. Michael Korba knew that in his bones and sought to give that to St. Mary's in Whiting. That's the kind of institution that it was. We have musicians from this parish. One of the longest serving pastors was Monsignor Andrew Sokol. And as we made the transition from Slavonic to English, ahead of its time, long before the Second Vatican Council, and against great consternation by other ecclesiastical authorities, Greek Catholics have traditionally led the way in translating its liturgy to the vernacular, over and against even our Orthodox counterparts, but that's a footnote. Monsignor Andrew Sokol was one of the first transcribers of our musical tradition, Prostopina, into English, and sought to instantiate that in the life of this church. In fact, we had a traveling choir under the direction of Andrew David Petrin for many years. We also had a historian, Father John Slivka. Father John Slivka ended his days in New York in the Eparchy of Passaic, and he was of an old school who never let not having a degree get in the way of his education, and saw that the early story of our church was slowly and slowly passing away, right? And he was afraid of amnesia, because what is our history but the very memory of the church? And any of you that have friends and relatives with Alzheimer's recognize that when your loved one loses their memories, in a certain way, they also cease to be themselves. So he wants to be the custodian for the church's memory, so that we would never forget who it is. Even the difficult parts, he would record the fights. But that's a good Byzantine Catholic tradition. Look at all the ways in which we commemorate the ecumenical councils. We sing the names of our heretics, because it's important to remember the fight, because it's in the fight that we learn how the church to discern the work of the Spirit to show us who God is, true man, begotten, not made, of one substance with the Father. In the big picture, our Holy Fathers did that for us in the ecumenical councils. And in our particular situation in the United States, Father John Slivka did that and had at his disposal all of the treasure troves that he found from St. Mary's to do that when he was pastor, and he was cantor here for quite a long time. I said saints. We have the only sacred place still consecrated by, we hope, we heard even from the Vatican in the person of Cardinal Semeraro today, Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, who consecrated our cemetery. He came here in 1910. He was the head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church from 1901 to 1944, led the Ukrainian Church through two world wars, led the Ukrainian Church in its expansion as immigrants came from Europe to the United States and to Canada. He had to face the fascists on the left, communists on the right. He was of a rich, almost billionaire family of Polish nobility, of original Ukrainian stock, but despoiled himself of his noble estate to join the peasant church. He aligned himself with the margins, whether they were in the Hutsul regions of Ukraine or whether they were far-flung immigrants beneath the towering oil refineries here in Standard Oil. And when our church, that all it ever knew how to do was fight to move forward, he came as an instrument of unity and celebrated liturgy here, his first stop in the United States after he came to the Eucharistic Congress in Montreal, and consecrated our cemetery that still stands today in Hammond, Indiana. There you are. It ain't much, but it's ours. The gift that St. Mary's has given is it allowed us, a people from nowhere, betwixt and between, always colonized, never our own kingdom, beneath the reign of other people's empires, to become a people from somewhere, for somewhere. And that is Whiting, Indiana. In what was once a composition of Eastern European immigrants from Western Ukraine, Eastern Slovakia, and Northeast Hungary, you can come to St. Mary's now and you will see and hear at least 5 language groups represented both liturgically and in the population of our congregation, right? This has allowed us to show you just in a little bit of a glimpse, and Laura will get us a little bit of current about what's going on here, about how flexible an institution, a parish, can be. It can be missionary. It can be a source for renewal of the church's own memory. And it can be the space where saints can come and bring together divided groups that want to just keep fighting and separating. So,
go to your next slide. Oh, okay. Sorry.
yeah.
Okay. So my name is Laura, as you know, and as Father Cyril said, I'm the editor of one magazine, and you see this in Catholics. The reason I'm pointing this out is because it's the publication of Catholic Communities Welfare Association. It is the only Vatican organization founded exclusively to care for the Eastern churches in their lands of origin, both for their charitable work and their pastoral work. And we have the privilege for me to work for them, and we have the privilege of having presidents of the organization, Monsignor Riccardi here, who will speak more about that, about this organization and our mission in the next session. In addition to being a journalist and editor, I've worked for a number of outlets. I used to work for Vatican News, Vatican Radio, Catholic News Service, etc. And I think some of you are familiar that I used to edit the Horizons newspaper. But maybe what you don't know and you're not familiar with is that prior to being a journalist and alongside my journalism, I used to work full-time and part-time in pastoral ministry and pastoral work. I was a chaplain, the equivalent of what would be a chaplain in a high school, a chaplain in a grade school. I was what was the equivalent of the director of religious education in my own parish, catechist on the liturgical committee, the Eucharistic minister, you name it, I was doing it. And I was instrumental in growing a lot of the ministries that we had in our parish. There's a summer day camp, we moved 300 kids to 500 kids. Our catechism program had 1,000 children in that that were preparing just for the sacraments. Not the whole catechism program, just kids preparing for the sacraments. That's the parish that I grew up in. And I mention this to you because I did all of that alongside a very visionary priest who's pictured here, Father Renewal. I'm from Montreal, and this is my home parish. We study Maria's teaching, and that's my parish, down in Roman Catholic parish. Very helpful Christians in English. And this is really important in the story of St. Mary's, because when we arrived here, before we came here, Bishop Neal assigned us and said, this is the last chance for St. Mary's. We either make it work or we close it. After years and years of threatening to close St. Mary's, this was the last attempt. And in one of our first liturgies, I always sit at the back and I always observe and I look at how people are praying, how they're looking, and just assessing, how our people are doing. And that one of the first liturgies, afterwards, I went a little debrief after Sunday liturgy over lunch, and there were 14 people in church, and the vast majority were gray hair. There's nothing wrong with being gray hair. But I said to my husband, it's altogether possible that in 5 years, just because of the course of life, natural attrition, that we won't have anybody left confused. And we had two families at the time. The Deacon's family was assigned here, and another family from the Henrys, who have been one of the historic families, and that was it. So we implemented an evangelization program, a vision of evangelization of Father Renewal, who was a Salesian priest, and I'm a Salesian cooperator, which is a lay associate in the Salesian movement. And our focus is young people, our focus is families, our focus is poor. And he has a spirituality that I call the spirituality of the piazza, the town square, right? And very much this idea that Gianfranco was talking about yesterday, we attended his talk, the idea of la chiesa che fa la vicenda della città, the church in the center of the city. And so if you understand what a piazza is, or a square is, in Europe, a lot of the squares have a church, right? And a lot of them have a water fountain. And isn't it interesting that in the same spot, you have two sources of life, water and the Eucharist. And they're paired together, they're physically, concretely, right, in the urban planning. And on one of our pilgrimages, our first Byzantine Catholic pilgrimage that we organized with Horizons in 2017 to Panama, Father Tom Loya, who was a retreat master, he pointed this out, right? He said, look at all of these piazzas, so many of them are circular, and all of the roads lead from the piazza into the town. It's Eucharistic spirituality, isn't it? Right? From the church to the world. It's a gathering spot. And so we implemented this spirituality of the piazza here at St. Mary's. I know about evangelization programs and mind renovation, a whole bunch of others. I've never read any books. I don't know any of them. I know this model, and I know that it works. And what Father Renewal would do is he really made the church the center of the community. He wasn't just the priest of Maria Ieraci. He was the church, the priest of the borough. Everybody knew Father Renewal. He was a mini celebrity, I guess you would say. He had relationships, built relationships with everybody. With the local politicians, he would get a little bit of his discretionary budget for the van, for the kids to take to soccer games, to take to the camp up north that we had in the Laurentian region, right? We would get discretionary income from our politicians. He built these kinds of relationships. He organized a commission in the neighborhood, in the borough, at his initiative, with all of the representatives of all of the youth activities that happened in the borough. Not the Catholic Church activities. Everybody, the soccer club, the skating club, even the juvenile delinquency center, which was called Long by the way, right? The school principals, the Girl Guides, Boy Scouts, you name it, the softball, anybody with anything with youth was sitting around that table on the women in the basement of the sisters' convent. The Salesian sisters had a wonderful convent, and we were all gathered there. I say we because he insisted 18 at the time, and I was having conversations and dialogue with leaders of youth programs in the community. And after everybody would have their turn talking about what they're doing, then you turn to the young people and say, Laura, what's happening? What's the word on the street? What do young people need? And what you talk about is, what are the concerns that you're hearing about in your families? What are your families struggling with? What can we do together as a team, as a community, to help our families and our young people? It was the church at the service of the community, leading the way, leading the discussion. And that is the environment I was raised in. That's the environment in which I did pastoral work and pastoral ministry. And that's the vision that we brought to St. Mary's. And so here what we have is Father Andrew who went out and built similar relationships with everybody in the community, right? And so we even concretely put this vision, into practice by creating, I'm sure you've seen it, our own Piazza Santa Maria, right out front, right? What you see there when we were praying with the benches wasn't there when we got here. That was closed off, it was all grass and the shrine was falling apart. We blew out the gate, put in some bricks, put in some benches, and now we have our own little piazza. We have our own little square, the spirituality of the piazza. And people will come, and it's a public space. I see people stopping there all the time, parents with children. People just walking by alone who will stop there and sit on the benches for a quiet moment with the Mother of God. I love it when I see teenagers who will at night be getting up on the benches in the light of the Blessed Mother. What better places there would be for young people to hang out but under the mantle of the Blessed Mother? So this is the idea of the spirituality of the piazza. And so we went one step further. We had a corner lot with a little piece of land there. And we said, well, we do something like that, right? And so we did. We turned it into a Marian prayer room, right? That's what you see now. Another gathering spot. And this is our ladies' church for the West. And I have to underline here the importance of also working with the other priests in the community. Father Tom has been so supportive of the work that we're doing here. He painted this icon. He painted the stars that you see under that old outdoors. We have his support, and some of you might have also heard about how instrumental he was, several years ago, again, right before they redid the interior. To assess whether or not St. Mary's should continue, right? Whether or not the hierarchy should invest in this particular church, in this particular parish community. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of working collaboratively and supporting each other in the mission of the church. I know a lot of us are alone. We are sometimes like one parish, I don't want to call them boonies, but very isolated. Sometimes we have only one mission church in the entire state. It can be kind of lonely. When we're close together, this kind of collaboration is so important. And even if we are more isolated, we shouldn't hesitate to reach out and ask others for support, right? They got plenty of things on the wheels. We can help each other out. Let's not hesitate to do that. So the spirituality of the piazza. We also created another space, which you're using for this week, we call it the Byzantine Catholic, right? Again, another space that wasn't used very much. We paved it to have outdoor gatherings, a place of assembly for our community. Now, there's another opportunity that we're having, that we're considering, we're discerning, we're planning. There are 3 Roman Catholic parishes in Whiting, and 2 of them are closing. They're all merging together. Well, one of them hosts Whiting Food Pantry. Well, guess who was put in a bid to host, to take over the Whiting Food Pantry, right? Continuously taking on initiatives where we can be part of the community. And so what we've done in this plan is we've created something very interesting that people have learned as well. We don't just have parishioners. We have what we call Friends of St. Mary's, right? So we have relationships in kind of concentric circles. Our core group of parishioners who, God bless them, thought that none of this would be possible. They have committed to the vision. And even if they don't know what's called spirituality of the Piazza, they have committed to it, completely. And this is also, the result of having conversations with parishioners, or you call having a few with some parishioners, where the question is, do you want St. Mary's to just be a place where you come for Sunday worship, or do you want St. Mary's to be a beacon of the gospel in Northwest Indiana? What do you want? And if you want to be a beacon of the gospel in Northwest Indiana, then we need to do things a little bit differently, right? I think we all want to be beacons of the gospel. I don't think anybody wants a parish to be a vanity project. If we do, we need to do a little bit of soul searching, right? So this is kind of like the impulse behind the vision. And let me just see that I got all the notes. Yes, that renewing a parish is not magic; it's method, right? And it's commitment. And I can say that I know that we kind of plan worked when I pick up the parish phone, and on the other end of the line is someone from City Hall who said, hi, Laura, this is the City Hall, so we're having a tree planting ceremony at the Lakefront Park. Can Father come and bless the tree? Yes. And then the next phone call, can Father come and bless the ambulances? Yes. Can Father come and bless the fire trucks? Yes. Can Father be on the board of the Chamber of Commerce, on the board of the YMCA? Can he be a judge of pierogies at the Pierogi Fest? Yes. Right? So this idea that Father Andrew, that the pastor of St. Mary's Parish, is not just the pastor of St. Mary's Parish. He's the priest for everyone. And that comes from this outward motion, this making sure that in our grounds, in our architecture, but also in our spirit, that we are outward looking. This idea of the piazza, of the square.
It was only when I came to St. Mary's that I truly discovered my vocation and strength as a Pierogi Fest judge. To speak a little bit about Laura, what we've been able to do in cultivating this spirituality of the piazza does precede us, and she alluded to that a little bit. And it really came about through diving deep into the history of St. Mary's, as I explained, and our wider Byzantine Catholic tradition. And I think if I could leave you with just one thing to think about, when it's such a potent tool, our history. That's why we've been called since the Second Vatican Council to recover our ancestral traditions, because what we have is a portion of divine revelation that is peculiarly our own. What is divine revelation but the proclamation of the gospel? If we don't dive into this history, the proclamation of the gospel that comes from the Catholic Church is at best incomplete and at worst incoherent. Okay? And we can use the history and the traditions, and we can do it in negative ways and positive ways. We can use history to enable bad behavior. Why do we do this? Yeah, we do it because we always did it, even if it was a mistake, right? Or you can use your history to ennoble your community and ennoble the possibility and provide the possibility for what Paul calls all of us to, a renewal of mind in Christ Jesus. That's what we get when we restore our ancestral traditions, a renewal of mind in Christ Jesus. I said we had all of the bones of St. Mary's Byzantine Catholic Church in the pendentives and the dome, the acoustics and what have you, but we were short on iconographers. We were strangers in some ways in a new territory, and even strangers of our own tradition. So we had very beautiful images. This is actually not the original church. I said this is the third of 4 renovations in St. Mary's Church. We had a wooden structure where the hall sits now, Church 1. We had a 1917 version. This is what we had from the 1960s. And in these domes, you had the glorious mysteries of the Rosary, which propped up this church in prayer for very many years. But then you also had an icon screen that was sort of haphazardly put in the 1960s. You had a baldacchino, which is a beautiful thing, and is the backdrop. This church is the backdrop for how many memories, how many baptisms, how many weddings, how many funerals. To do a change this drastic is going to disturb a lot of memories. The only thing we can do is make new ones. And so that's what we set out to do, right? We perform sacraments in this church, adults and kids. We crown in marriage families who are birthing new Byzantine Catholics, even though they have not 1 ounce of Rusin blood, but they're 100% Byzantine Catholic. It provides the stuff that prophecy is made of. When we came here, there were 14 very loving, very Christian, but severely elderly founders and benefactors of this holy church who were sticking around even when their kids thought they were crazy, even when their friends moved to the suburbs and went to the pretty people churches. And those old men had visions, and their young men dreamed dreams because they could see the new life that sprung up. We were able to give these elderly, many of whom we buried. I just buried 2 in the last 3 weeks and did the final anointing of a 3rd because they all come in 3s yesterday morning. They can die with a renewed mind in Christ Jesus, that everything they stuck it out for wasn't in vain. Then when you tell your story right, some really important things can happen. The biggest event in the state of Indiana after the Indianapolis 500 is a Pierogi Fest. It will happen next weekend. You're all welcome. I get bigger crowds on the Sunday of Pierogi Fest than I do for Pascha. And I'm the only air-conditioned show in town, so they show up for church. And 2 years ago, we wanted to restore the fact that historically, Pierogi Fest was a Catholic festival. In its first year, all the churches brought their pierogies out. They totally sold out, and they realized they couldn't do anymore. So the churches abandoned ship, and companies and agencies and caterers took over, and it totally got commercialized and blew up. We are now the only church on the street. Yeah, we're selling nut roll, but we're giving church tours. Every year we've had a church tour. Every year we've had a sacrament out of a church tour. We wanted to restore the Catholicity in its origins of this festival, and they got poor taste in music, the Chamber of Commerce that organizes it. So I wanted to up the ante. So I brought my friends, the Hillbilly Thomists, who are Billboard chart-topping bluegrass musicians, to come and play the first Catholic day at Pierogi Fest, to sensitize these people to the Catholic origins and to give people a good time. When they did, the town historians fell in love with the Hillbilly Thomist and told a story that I didn't even know. Bluegrass itself was founded in Whiting. Bill Monroe, the godfather of bluegrass, got his start playing with his brother Charlie Monroe while he worked at Standard Oil. He played in church halls just like ours. He learned his twang from tambourines bands on the southeast side of Chicago. Well, we got to tell this story. So we brought them back for a revival to show us how serious, not just the history of St. Mary's is, but how serious Whiting is, right? I wanted to show Whiting off And I used the Hillbilly Thomists who did it. So we did it in collaboration with the University of Notre Dame. We had a professor come out to play with them, to interview them, to talk about their music, to talk about Catholicity. And you know what? I'll tell a beautiful story. Laura and I will sometimes dance in our kitchen to the Hillbilly Thomists, and they got a really beautiful song dedicated to Veronica. There she is right up there, right? It's a nice slow song. Unbeknownst to us, we told them about it, and unbeknownst to us, they made it public. So they dedicated their penultimate song to us, and I couldn't do anything but dance. But I'm not going to dance by myself. I took Laura, and I made everybody dance, you know? And there was a daughter who danced with their father in the front row. Her parents did not want her to marry her husband. Wasn't good enough for her, and protested the wedding to the point where her father wasn't even able to dance with her daughter at the wedding. The first time they ever danced together in 10 years of marriage was at the Bluegrass Bourbon and Bible Revival. Yeah. When you anoint somebody who's sick, you open the gospel book and you put it on their head. And that's hand does the healing. That's all we've been doing in this church, is just opening up the gospel and laying it upon people's heads and letting the sick recover from their beds with moments like that. And so now that's why we're in the business of giving away the beauty of our history, giving away the beauty of our building, giving away the beauty of our worship, giving away the beauty of our community, because beauty is a transcendental along with the good and the true. It's public property, it's public domain. And so that's why we've been involved in these last years in revitalizing ourselves through a campaign known as the Accessibility to Beauty Project. You're a part of it. Now, we're not just raising money to put our stained glass windows into better shape, the oldest sacred art in this historic church. We're not just raising money to get better bathrooms that were just simply an afterthought. We are continuing this work of making beauty public property with events like this North American Byzantine Catholic Assembly. So that's what we're involved in. We had a successful first phase. Through the help of Partners for Sacred Places, who have been excellent consultants for us, through the help of Indiana Landmarks Sacred Places Indiana, and through the help of, as I said, the wider community as well as our interior community, we've been able to preserve and protect that side of stained glass windows and are now working on the rest. You know? Took 8 years, but we're an overnight success. Yeah? And so this gift is what we've been given, and this is the gift that we're trying to give away so that everybody could have hands on that property. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm glad that, good morning, everybody. Good morning. And this is much cooler than yesterday, so I like that. And apparently technology works. I'm listening with great interest, my friends, Father Andrew and Laura, because, and I was thinking, they somehow embody the story they're sharing with you, what is Partners for Sacred Places mantra, which is at the intersection of faith, heritage, and community. That's really our MO, right? That's what we teach, and that's what we try to share with everybody across the country and beyond. We have worked in England and in Europe as well, not just in the United States. This idea to bring the church at the center of the village is very important. You're doing it. We did a study for St. Mary. It was a feasibility study to assess what were the challenges and the possibility for this parish to raise money and to be successful in a capital campaign. And there was a comment of somebody that stuck with me, and this is, I wasn't involved per se with the project, my colleague were, but I, of course, read the report and gave my final approval. There was a comment that was made, which was from somebody that said, I used to walk by St. Mary and basically have no idea what this church was and what was doing. But then after a few years, I guess after you guys came here, it started thinking, I am curious to walk in and to figure it out what's happening in there. That's important. That's very, very important. You know, I work with hundreds of thousands actually of congregation, and everybody asks me the same question. You know, Mr. Grande or Gianfranco, whatever they call me, our congregation is shrinking, it's getting smaller. Our buildings is starting to fade. What can we do? Everybody expects the magic trick, the wand, the magician that speaks funny and shows up and fixes everything. And I always say, first of all, if you want to save your congregation, your building, make noise. Make noise. Make good noise. That's what you guys are doing. Noise. Not just because you have a very powerful voice. But make noise. Attract people that don't know you. They have no idea, not just about the Byzantine church or the Roman Catholic church or whatever. Just make noise. People will attract. People will come. And then with time, they will learn, the gospel and eventually become members of the parish. When you want to save a building like this, which you are doing, restore, bring it back to its perfect function, it takes time. It's not easy. I always say to people, look guys, a campaign, a capital campaign, is never a walk in the park. It's always difficult. You always have challenges. First of all, just the idea of raising money scares people. And if somebody says, well, you have to raise 2 million, 3 million. We've been involved in campaigns where congregation have to raise 15, 20 million. Congregation of 80 people, 90 people have to raise huge amount of money. How you do it? You do it with a plan. Stick with the plan. But the real trick, this is something is a trick. If you just learn this trick, you'll be in a good place. The trick is the magic of the idea. Why you want to restore a place like this? What is the magic? It's not how many bricks you're going to buy. It's not what kind of painting you're going to use. It's not what kind of wiring inside the walls you're gonna change. But why are you doing this project? And the project you do it, in my opinion, is very simple. First of all, you are trying to restore the house of God. And that's what I think Father Romano, in his very intelligent way, was doing. Restoring the house of God. Okay? And that's the key. Then things will happen. The community-wide approach is fundamental nowadays. I promise you, there are very few congregations in America today that can raise 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 million just with the congregations or with the diocese help. It's it's impossible. So the one that are successful are the one like Father Andrew and Laura understood that they have to go beyond the parish to ask and seek for help. Really open their minds. I could tell you many stories, but we have a limited time. I have to catch a flight. I have one story I want to share. There is this man, his name is Freeman Zausner. He gave me permission to share the story. That's why it's his name. He's a very successful businessman. He's the CFO, was the first CFO of Urban Outfitters. You know, the younger people you probably know is the closest. She's nodding, right? So anthropology, all these things. In Philadelphia. So every morning he would walk to go to work. And he would walk by St. Francis de Sales, a marvelous large church. And he walked by there every day for years. Finally, one day he said, you know what, I'm going to walk in and see what is this building. And he went inside and he sat. He left an hour later and he Went back the afternoon and went to talk to the pastor, and he donated $2 million for the restoration. True story. Not only, he was a Jew, and he converted. And he converted. Now lives in Maine, in a quaint little town in Maine, and he donated a couple of $100,000 to some, UCC, Unitarian Church of Christ, some Protestant church there. So good things happen when you make noise, but when your doors are open and your hearts are open and your minds are open, that's when money will come. Our church, both the Byzantine and the Latin, have been around for a little bit, right? And we invented fundraising. Not kidding you. The popes there in the Middle Age or later on would say, you go to heaven, give me the land. That's great fundraising. That's a bequest. It's wonderful planned giving. Planned giving. So we invented. We have the copyright of that. But besides the jokes, my message is to have a plan, to believe in the magic while you're doing something, and have leadership, because you might be very humble, but those things are possible when there is a strong leadership. So, thank you. No, I don't need that. That's for you guys. Not for me.
What's that?
No, I said closet for you, not for me.
I just wanted to say, I mentioned in my talk that it's not magic, it's method. And an important part of the method that we used here, of course, I didn't mention, but I was remiss not to say it because it was key. We started with this prayer.
Right.
We started with a prayer campaign. Our first Lent was a prayer campaign for the renewal of the parish. And in the next Lent, we took on Searching for the Lost, the Mother of God Searching for the Lost, as a kind of adopted icon, right? And to draw her children back, right? And our side garden is dedicated to the Mother of God Searching for the Lost. So prayer is extremely important, and it's also part of the Salesian vision that I grew up in as well, the dream of St. John Bosco, where the Pope is on a bark of Peter, right? And he's in a storm, and he has safe passage between two pillars. On one pillar is the Eucharist, the liturgical worship. On the other pillar is the Mother of God. And this is what we practice here too. We have a strong liturgical life. Father introduces a very strong liturgical life here at St. Mary's, and of course a devotion to the Mother of God. In your red bags that you got from St. Mary's, you have our case for support. That's what we call it. That's the document we pulled together that tells our story. That's what we're using also in our fundraising. And you can see there all the different ways how we've plugged into the community. Our story is there for you. I hope you can use it as a resource. It's not there for us to say, hey, look at St. Mary's, aren't we great? It's there for you as a resource that you can model something like that in your own fundraising and your parishes.
We do have some time for questions. Yeah. I don't see anybody being an objection. All right. David, can you run questions?
Sure. So my question is, I think...
We have only one microphone, so just make sure you give it back.
We, in the United States now, we're almost at this crossroads where we either have parishes that are like this, that are, older, historical, potentially dying, and need survival and evangelization. On the other end, we have places like where I'm out in Phoenix, that are like Phoenix, outside of Denver, with outreaches and missions. And it's almost the complete opposite, yet at the same time, the mission is obviously still very much the same. What advice would you guys have for those types of communities? Obviously, it's not the same kind of historical preservation in this sense, but what would your thoughts or recommendations be for those types of communities that are newer, but still coming from this heritage, where there's this understanding of the past tradition and all that, together with making this good noise for another day?
I think the gift, I'll just say a couple things. To dive deep into our tradition, I think gives you a lot of these principles that we've been articulating for you. Number one, Restoring your venerable traditions is a restoration of the proclamation of the gospel. And there are really creative ways that help us think through this, okay? First of all, in the Byzantine liturgy, your city is ritual space, right? What are the opening antiphons of the Divine Liturgy but a procession through the city of Constantinople, leading people from station to station and letting them into the doors of the church, right? Take your church outside, right? Holy Week is one big time to go on a walk together as a church. There's a procession almost every day. And if not, you could have another one, right? But what does that also sensitize us to is, again, the spirituality of the piazza and recognizing that in season and out of season, we need to be in relationship to this community. In church and out of church, we need to be in relationship to this community, right? We can close down the streets of Whiting as we did last night and as we will tomorrow, not because we asked them out of nowhere, but because we have an 8-year relationship of us here with these people and a 125-year relationship of processions. I don't know if you have anything to say.
There was actually, I think she... Yeah.
Oh, here and then...
It was very similar.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm just very curious if there are resources available that might tackle the issue of. We went to go see Annunciation yesterday, and one of the things that really stuck out to me was that lawyer that 24/7. What about parishes that are in locations where that's not an issue or an option due to security, where tabernacles are being sold and vandalized? Are there resources available that we could look at to kind of be able to have options to be open to the community and be able to evangelize the community and stuff like that in situations where security is an issue?
I didn't understand completely.
I think the point you made about security being an issue, right? I'm not sure if President Franco's talked yesterday, but he spoke about how the church can be at the heart of community renewal. I think it all goes back to relationship. Talk about how this one parish was able to turn a very troubled community in Chicago, Wabash community, around completely, and really the crime make it safer neighborhood. It starts with, I believe this is true, it starts with the relationship the church has with the community, with its authorities. Again, the church where I grew up, our parish, our pastoral team was always in charge with the police station. We even had a work day where we had a big park here at the church, big pine trees that keep going behind there, shooting up, and other things happen that we didn't want in our community. So we collaborated with the police, and we cut pine trees 6 feet, like a shade of there's no place to hide. Right? And that cleaned up. So that's kind of creative thinking, and you may want to phase things in, but I would say think with other people who are interested in safety and security in your neighborhood. Think outside. Who can I partner with in my neighborhood to make this a safer place? It might be the police, it might be other community interest groups.
I have, thank you, Laura. Sure. Thank you, and thank you for, you were listening yesterday when I was talking. Always amaze me, so good, wow. There is something called the Foundation Directory, and you can, start scrolling down to see funders that might be interested in supporting, security, or go to talk to a synagogue. The Jews, our brothers and sisters from the Jewish faith, always struggle with that, and there are a lot of grants out there for security, cameras and all the things. But one thing I have to say, and this is an American thing, so I'm not American, so I'm gonna say, forgive me, don't get mad at me, but Americans are obsessed with security, with fear. You guys are obsessed with fear, for heaven's sake. What is it? I came in this country 29 years ago. Bishop, you can't go inside the church. They're always closed. And the reason is because somebody can't come in or might break in. Right? So, it's important to keep the doors open. Of course, I understand security. There are resources, maybe a mix of things. And if you lose something, somebody steals something, so be it. You can always rebuy it. I think it's okay. But there is money for that type of thing. Go talk to the Jews. They're good at that.
I would add also, the first steps of reaching out and being more open, you come to a little hesitant. There's always some, hesitancy. You have to take the risk.
Right.
I mean, when we were considering putting that piazza Sant'Maria and I call it out in front, I mean, one of the things that we said was, hey, we are essentially changing the rectory's front yard for all priests to come. Like the next priest may not want strangers coming so close to the front door, because there's the front door of the rectory right behind that shrine altar, right? And so we had to become a little problem for us, but comfortable with the fact that strangers are going to get real close. We don't know what's coming up to the shrine altar, what their intentions are, right? And at the same time, we said it's worth it. And if the next priest doesn't like it, too bad. Because, right, we have this vision of we are part of this community and we want people. We want people to come to us.
Yeah. And you take the risk of renewing your parish, you are making a whole lot of work for yourself. You know why? Because the people that you attract when you take that risk, their marriages break down, you got to deal with it. They get depressed, and you have to visit them in the hospitals, and you have to deal with it. They fall back into a drug addiction, and you have to deal with it. They lose their children to foster care, and you have to deal with it. They foster kids, and they have to submit them back to the system because their birth parents want them back, and you have to deal with it. But it's the risk and the reward of what comes from doing your mission, right? It's worth every risk, so do it without calculation. Yeah.
This presentation is very close to home for me. This is my parish of baptism, Father Andrew Sokol. My name on my baptismal certificate from Mother's Parish. I have my first divine liturgy here. It's not my home parish, St. Nicholas, but I need some room. It wasn't this church, it was the church you saw on the screen before Renewal. And I was also, this is why I stood up to speak, I was also one of the naysayers. Before you came, Father Andrew, why are they putting all this money into this church that there's 14 people? Very wonderful, dedicated. Why? I was vocal like them to join the choir on that. Why are they doing this? So my point, all credit always goes to God, but to you, Father Andrew, and you, Lord, for this amazing, amazing transformation and renovation of this place.
And for the Christians of St. Mary's Parish, because they believe. The dedication of our young cantors and our young families and others who have chosen us. Not everybody is baptized here. People chose to come here. They chose to return to the church of baptism. They are really the ones who deserve the credit. We are blessed to work with them. We are blessed.
Everything that has, all the most beautiful things that have happened here, God has done, and even independent of all of our machinations. But to be able to collaborate with that's been a tremendous gift. Why don't we, it's Our Lady's Church, so why don't we end underneath the protection of Our Lady, okay? It is truly proper to glorify you, O Theotokos, the the ever-blessed Immaculate and the Mother of our God, more honorable than the cherubim, and beyond compare more glorious than the seraphim, who a virgin gave birth to God the Word. You truly the Theotokos, we